I watched Mission Impossible on a plane, and I really liked it. So I almost immediately watched the other 6 films in the series, and I really liked them as well. However, there is a spectre haunting these films, the spectre of Scientology. Tom Cruise, who stars in and produces the Mission Impossible films, is a member of the highly controversial Church of Scientology, and a devoted member at that. Given how important Scientology is to Cruise, and how important Cruise is to the Mission Impossible franchise, it's worth asking one important question. How closely do the Mission Impossible films adhere to the principles of Scientology? Much like how the Scientology cross has 8 points, my test for alignment with Scientology has 8 categories that each film will be scored on from a scale of 1 to 10. The first category is psychiatry. Scientologists believe that psychiatry is an evil practice based in lies. As an alternative, they offer auditing, which I'll go more in depth about later. Points in this category will be assigned based on how characters deal with their mental problems. The film will get a lower score if they use methods similar to psychiatry, and a higher score if they use methods similar to auditing. Speaking of auditing, our second category centers around the biggest benefit of auditing: superpowers. According to Scientology, with enough auditing, a person can achieve supernatural powers such as enhanced senses, telekinesis, astral projection, and functional godhood. Tom Cruise will have the abilities he exhibits in these films scrutinized to give a score. The more superpowers he exhibits, the higher the score. Our third category is sci-fi. The founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, was a prolific sci-fi author, so it's no surprise that many sci-fi concepts pop up in Scientology's beliefs. Scientology contains tales of galaxy-wide civilizations, advanced space travel, and soul brainwashing facilities. To test how much sci-fi is in these films, I'll look at how advanced the technology present in them is. More advanced tech means more points. Of course, I can't talk about sci-fi and Scientology without talking about the entity around which all of this sci-fi tech and our fourth category revolves around: Lord Xenu. According to Scientology, Xenu was a galactic dictator who looked out his window one day and decided he had an overpopulation problem. So he called in billions of aliens in for income tax audits, put them on spaceships that looked like planes, threw them into volcanoes, nuked the volcanoes, brainwashed the souls of the aliens, and gave humanity depression by leaving a bunch of brainwashed alien souls to wander Earth. The more Xenu-like traits the Mission Impossible villains express, the more points their respective films get. Despite being so central to Scientology, the tale of Xenu has only recently become widely known. This is due to the subject of our fifth category: secrecy. The Church of Scientology kept the story of Xenu secret from most of its believers on account of it being the kind of stuff you can only believe in once you have thousands of dollars of sunk costs. When the secret leaked, the church filed lawsuits to suppress the information. Furthermore, Scientologists once infiltrated the government to purge damaging records. It's clear from these instances that the Church of Scientology loves its secrets. Similarly, the Mission Impossible films have plenty of secrets and deception, and the more there is, the more points they're getting. Our sixth category has to do with loyalty. The Church of Scientology demands great loyalty from its more dedicated followers. Rather infamously, members of the C organization must sign a 1 billion year contract pledging their souls to Scientology. Some Scientologists express fanatical loyalty to the church, cutting off family members, giving away vast sums, and even doing crimes on its behalf. As a result, the more loyalty is emphasized and valued in these films, the more points they're getting. The subject of our seventh category, revenge, is something that Scientology is no stranger to. The Church of Scientology has engaged in vicious retaliation campaigns against those who have wronged it. The most infamous of these cases is the case of Paulette Cooper, an author who wrote a book critical of Scientology and was subsequently bombarded with lawsuits and framed for making bomb threats. For this category, I will be looking at how much the heroes of each Mission Impossible film are motivated by revenge. The more central revenge is to their motivation, the more points the film gets. Last, and certainly not least, is the most important aspect of Scientology: tax evasion. After losing its tax-exempt status, the Church of Scientology fought bitterly to regain it, waging a campaign of espionage and lawsuits against the IRS that eventually succeeded. It's clear that the Church of Scientology really doesn't like paying taxes. As a series of high-octane action films, the Mission Impossible franchise doesn't feature many tax-filing scenes, so we'll have to get creative for this one. In addition to the cost of things such as equipment and travel used by the government agents these films focus on, I'll look towards the stuff that gets destroyed over the course of these films. If something gets destroyed by a government agent, that's a cost being imposed by a government, which can creatively be interpreted as a form of taxation. Similarly, if something belonging to a government gets destroyed, that's going to have to be repaired with taxes. Films that have less expensive operations, less destruction of government property, and less destruction of property by government agents will get higher scores in this category. After the scores in these 8 categories are calculated, they will be added up to get a final score out of 80. The higher a film's score, the more aligned it is with the teachings of the glorious L. Ron Hubbard. And now that the rules are out of the way, it's time to start with the first film of the Mission Impossible franchise. Mission Impossible. Oh yeah, spoilers. Mission Impossible begins with its main character, Impossible Missions Force Agent Ethan Hunt, witnessing the death of his entire team. This has a negative effect on his mental well-being, resulting in him experiencing hallucinations about his dead teammates. There is only one moment where someone tries to help him deal with his guilt, and that's when Ethan's boss Kittredge tries to steer him away from blaming himself for the death of his team. This is very similar to cognitive therapy, a method through which psychiatry treats PTSD that involves getting rid of negative thought patterns. So there's psychiatry in this film. It gets 1 point, right? Not so fast. For starters, this treatment clearly doesn't work, as Ethan experiences the hallucinations after his conversation with Kittredge. Secondly, Kittredge isn't actually trying to help Ethan. He thinks that Ethan is a traitor, and is just trying to get him on a plane that will take him to prison. Thus, the film is portraying psychiatry as both useless and a tool that's used to manipulate people in harmful ways, which perfectly lines up with Scientology's views. Of course, there isn't actually any auditing in the film, which prevents it from getting a perfect 10, but it gets a solid 7 in this category. Regarding superpowers, Ethan displays 4 of them throughout Mission Impossible. The first 2 powers are revealed in a sequence where he has to dangle from the ceiling to steal a disk from a CIA computer. At one point, Ethan hovers incredibly close to the ground, and remarkably, is able to prevent any part of his body from touching it, displaying supernatural levels of control of his body. Then, when 2 sweat drops move across his glasses and threaten to drip onto the floor and activate the alarms, he is able to see the exact moment the sweat is about to drip and catch the droplets with his hand, further demonstrating his supernatural bodily control and his second power, enhanced senses. Then, in the final battle on a train, Ethan is able to hold onto a moving train for extended periods of time, displaying a supernatural grip strength. During this battle, Ethan also reveals his 4th and greatest power, helicopters. Just before he is about to be cut by a helicopter's blades, the helicopter collides with the roof of a tunnel, saving his life. Then, he narrowly avoids being cut by the same helicopter's blades after it explodes. It's clear that he has some sort of telepathic control over helicopters that's allowing him to narrowly escape death over and over. With this wealth of incredible powers, it's clear that Ethan is a committed Scientologist who has unleashed the latent powers of his Satan, earning this film a 10. Mission Impossible is sadly lacking in the sci-fi department, likely due to it being made in the 1990s, a time when DVD players were cutting-edge technology. The gadgets that our heroes use include glasses that are able to transmit what you see, a powerful computer, a machine that redirects lasers, tracking devices, smartwatches, and tiny explosives. All of these things exist today. The only technology in this film that doesn't seem to have any modern-day counterpart is Mission Impossible's masks, which give perfect disguises in seconds. With only one piece of implausibly advanced technology, this film gets a 2. The villain of Mission Impossible is Jim Phelps. He was the leader of Ethan's team, who killed the whole team, faked his death, and framed Ethan to try and get away with some valuable intel that he wanted to sell to an arms dealer named Max. Phelps and Lord Xenu are a bit like each other and a bit unlike each other. On one hand, Phelps is a leader just like Xenu, kills people just like Xenu, and, in a chilling parallel to Xenu brainwashing alien souls, engages in deception. Most critically, just like how Lord Xenu's actions release alien souls that give people depression, Jim's actions give Ethan hallucinations. However, the scale and motive of his actions differ wildly from Xenu. Xenu kills billions, while Jim kills a measly 4 people. Xenu is motivated by overpopulation control, while Jim just wants to make money. Jim is clearly quite similar to Xenu, but differs in crucial ways. 7 points. As spies, the heroes of Mission Impossible do a lot of their work in secret. 3 characters wear disguises to get intel out of someone. 3 characters disguise themselves as party guests in an operation in Prague. Ethan pretends to be a traitor to get close to Max. 4 people disguise themselves as firefighters to break into the CIA. One of them changes her disguise to that of an office lady. She then secretly spikes a guy's drink. Ethan sneaks into a very high security room to get a disc. Ethan and his team stage a fire at the CIA. Ethan uses a magic trick to trick someone into giving him the disc. After Kittredge arranges to have Ethan's family arrested, Ethan calls him and pretends he doesn't care. When Jim reveals himself to Ethan and tries to trick him into thinking that Kittredge killed his team, Ethan figures out Jim was the traitor, but pretends to go along. On the train, Ethan's hacker buddy Luther pretends to be a normal traveler, and Ethan pretends to be Jim. This brings us to a total of 20 cases of secrecy. 18 of these are very brief, lasting for at most an hour or so. 2 of these, Ethan's deceiving of Max and Jim, last a while. While this is certainly a lot of secrets, we're grading on a bit of a curve, and there's going to be a lot more secrets later, so this film gets a 6. Loyalty is something that Mission Impossible values heavily. Ethan Hunt is a fiercely loyal person, continuing to work in the interests of the US by hunting down Max and Jim, even though it would be much easier to give up and flee or make a deal with Max and walk away with $10 million. In contrast, the villains of Mission Impossible have no loyalty at all. Jim is a traitor to the US, whose actions would result in the deaths of many of its agents. On a personal level, he betrays agents who he's worked with for years and shoots his own wife. The contrast between Ethan and Jim shows that this is a story where the villains are absolutely disloyal and the heroes are absolutely loyal. Well, mostly. There is a single wrinkle in that Luther isn't a perfect angel. However, that wrinkle has a wrinkle in it, in that Luther ultimately helps the US by helping Ethan defeat Max. So, Luther drags the score down a tiny bit, but this film still gets a 9. Throughout Mission Impossible, Ethan is heavily motivated by revenge. Jim has greatly wronged Ethan by killing all his teammates, framing him for their deaths, and killing a woman he had feelings for. Of course, Ethan has other motivations, such as clearing his name, but considering how violently he reacts to the loss of his teammates, it seems reasonable to assume that avenging them is his primary motivation. 9 points. Finally, we arrive at tax evasion. Starting with the cost of government operations, as I discussed in the sci-fi section, all the gadgets used are relatively low-tech and presumably don't cost that much. The more expensive stuff includes the film set Ethan's team uses in the opening scene, travel costs for transporting 2 teams of spies to Prague, paying for police officers to arrest Ethan's family, and paying for deluxe treatment for his family as an apology when they're released. Some government-owned stuff does also get destroyed, one of their cars gets blown up, and an embassy elevator is damaged due to someone being crushed by it. How inconsiderate of him. Regarding damage caused by government agents, the only damage is some spies breaking into Max's apartment. You may be surprised at this low amount of damage, as Ethan damages a restaurant, a helicopter, a train, and a tunnel throughout this film. However, it's important to remember that in all of those scenes, he's technically on vacation on account of his boss being engaged in an international manhunt for him. So none of this destruction can be construed as taxation. It's just some very intense vandalism by a private citizen. This all totals up to a remarkably low tax burden. 9 points. With high scores in every category except for sci-fi and secrecy, Mission Impossible earns a respectable 59. Mission Impossible 2 has no strong feelings one way or the other on psychiatry. At the beginning of the film, Ethan's friend, Dr. Nakorovich, gets murdered. Ethan is clearly upset by this, as seen by a vision he gets of Nakorovich. Ethan fixes the issue. Never. Nakorovich never comes up again, and Ethan neither goes to psychiatry nor gets audited to deal with the grief about his friend. This perfectly neutral position earns this film a 5. Ethan displays only 2 powers in Mission Impossible 2. The first is bird manipulation. Towards the end of the film, Ethan has to infiltrate a compound where he sneaks around and fights a bunch of people. The entire time, he is aided by the birds. Their sound cover up for his sounds, they distract enemies on his behalf, and they act as a sort of entourage for him, flying around to strike fear in the hearts of his enemies as he slowly walks past explosions. The sheer number of times the birds help Ethan shows that he has some sort of bird-related power. The second power is super speed. In the final battle against the villain, Ambrose, Ethan is held at gunpoint, but is able to kick a gun out of the sand, dive, catch the gun, aim the gun at Ambrose, and shoot. Any normal person would just end up a very sandy corpse on account of bullets traveling pretty fast. So Ethan's survival points to him having super speed. With half the number of superpowers, this film gets half the score of Mission Impossible. 5 points. Mission Impossible 2 has much better technology compared to its predecessor. In the sci-fi corner, we have the return of perfect disguise masks, we also have a voice-changing patch, and a virus that's spliced together from all the flus. In the advanced but not sci-fi corner, we have glasses that scan retinas, a dual compass, a keycard that tries all combinations, an injectable tracker, a laser cutter, and a fancy injection gun. There's definitely a lot more high-tech stuff, and even a gunfight that takes place in a very high-tech environment. Taking all this into account, this film gets a 5. Ambrose is shockingly similar to Xenu. He is the leader of his organization, plans on releasing an extremely deadly virus on the general public, which would kill millions, and engages in deception by pretending to be Ethan Hunt to get close to Dr. Nakorovich. Him killing Nakorovich even gives Ethan mental issues. The most impressive connection between Xenu and Ambrose is how Ambrose flies a plane full of unconscious people into a mountain, killing everyone, which is somewhat similar to how Xenu transports a bunch of aliens to their deaths on spaceships that look like planes. The only meaningful difference between Ambrose and Xenu is again motive, as Ambrose simply wants to make a lot of money, while Xenu wanted to do population control. Nonetheless, Ambrose's striking similarity to Xenu earns this film a 9. Once again, there is a lot of secrecy. Ethan doesn't tell the IMF where he's going for his vacation. Ethan's love interest Naya pretends to be an ordinary party guest to steal a necklace. She and Ethan hide in a bathtub. Ethan pretends to be head of security, and Naya pretends to be a subordinate when they're caught. The IMF, which sent Ethan to recruit Naya, doesn't tell him that they want Naya to seduce Ambrose until he's already done the sex with her, and it's kind of awkward. The IMF fakes Naya's arrest. Naya pretends to be in love with Ambrose. Naya covertly steals some intel from Ambrose. Ethan disguises himself as Dr. Nokorovich to get information out of a pharmaceutical executive. Ethan sneaks into a building to destroy the Chimera virus. Ethan sneaks into Ambrose's compound. Ethan disguises himself as Ambrose's henchman and disguises Ambrose's henchman as himself. This totals up to 15 cases of secrecy. 2 of these instances, Naya's arrest and Naya's feigned relationship with Ambrose, are pretty large scale. In the end, Mission Impossible 2 has a bit less secrecy than Mission Impossible and gets a score of 5. Mission Impossible 2 is, like its predecessor, a film that places a lot of value on loyalty. Ethan and Naya are both extremely loyal to each other. Ethan chooses her over his mission by refusing to kill her after she injects herself with Chimera, and instead risks everything to get her a cure. Similarly, Naya remains loyal to Ethan. She chose to inject herself with Chimera to protect Ethan, acts as a kind of human shield for him, and refuses to beg for her life when Ambrose dangles the cure in front of her. In contrast, Ambrose does a lot of betraying. He's an IMF agent who betrays the US by killing Nokorovich when he was sent to protect him. Furthermore, he betrays his ally, the pharmaceutical executive McCloy, by upping the price for Chimera from only $37 million to a majority stake of his company. With very loyal heroes, very disloyal villains, and no Luthor-shaped wrinkles, this film gets a perfect 10. Mission Impossible 2 could hypothetically be presented as a revenge story, but it really isn't one. Ambrose does kill Dr. Nokorovich and mistreat Naya, but revenge for these actions doesn't seem like Ethan's primary motivation. He's mainly motivated by a desire to save the world and Naya from Chimera, as seen by how he prioritizes giving Naya the cure over killing Ambrose in the final fight. Due to it having only the whisper of revenge-based motivation, this film gets a 2. Mission Impossible 2 really ratchets up the action from its predecessor, and that means ratcheting up the tax bill. The cost of these operations really aren't that high. None of the gadgets are particularly complicated, and the only thing left is flying 3 people to Sydney. I don't know what exactly the cost of making a bunch of fake news articles is, but it can't be that high. There also isn't that much damage to government property. A van gets blown up and a helicopter gets a few holes in it, and that's it. However, damage to private property by government agents is where the bill really starts racking up. Ethan blows up a really fancy and presumably very expensive lab, breaks a wall, heavily damages Ambrose's compound, and wrecks a ton of vehicles. He damages this car, blows up this car, causes another car to blow up, probably damaging this truck, causes another car to blow up and damage 4 other cars, and destroys 2 motorcycles through mid-air ramming. Also, Luthor blows up a car. This adds up to a lot of cars, which is a lot of money. 4 points. Adding up all the scores, we arrive at our final score for Mission Impossible 2 of 45. Mission Impossible 3 continues the streak of neutrality on psychiatry. Ethan fails to rescue one of his students, Lindsay, and feels extreme guilt about it. He deals with this by teaching his wife how to use a gun. Teaching your wife to use a gun isn't a common psychiatric practice, and it also isn't a part of the auditing process. Consequently, this film also gets a 5. Ethan displays 2 new superpowers in Mission Impossible 3. The first is aimbot. In order to break into a skyscraper, he has to swing onto a building and slide down it. In the process, he shoots 2 guards, both on his first try. This is impossible. It's somewhat dark, the guards are far away, Ethan is viewing the guards from a bad angle, and he's moving incredibly quickly down the slope. Clearly, he has some sort of enhanced sense that's allowing him to nail these shots. The second power is the greatest power of them all, the power of love. So, towards the end of the film, Ethan gets a bomb put into his brain, and his wife Julia is being held hostage. The villain, Owen Davian, activates the bomb, which pretty much completely incapacitates Ethan and allows him to be defeated with ease. However, Davian then announces that he's going to kill Julia, at which point Ethan immediately gets up, turns the tables, and kills Davian. There's no explanation for this other than the power of love. For its 2 superpowers, this film gets a 5. Mission Impossible 3 sees the return of all the outlandish technologies from Mission Impossible 2. It has the perfect masks, the voice changers, and even a powerful bioweapon called the Rabbit's Foot, which acts as this film's version of Chimera. The film also gives us a new impossible technology in the form of a machine which can make perfect masks in minutes. There's also a lot of very advanced tech. There's the aforementioned brain bomb, a portable brain scanner, a tiny dot that stores a video message, a Game Boy looking thing that can rewire security cameras, a gun that's disguised as a camera, a small mirror that can do 3D scans, a spray that destroys walls, a drone, and a tracking device. So, with a lot more advanced tech and one more case of outright sci-fi tech compared to Mission Impossible 2, this film gets a 6. Mission Impossible 3 has 2 villains, Owen Davian and John Musgrave. Davian is an arms dealer who plans on selling the Rabbit's Foot to a terrorist group, which would presumably kill a ton of people. He engages in deception by tricking Ethan into thinking he killed Julia. His hijinks with the brain bomb cause Ethan to develop mental issues, which is very Xenu-esque. Musgrave is an IMF trader who's helping Davian acquire the Rabbit's Foot. Musgrave, naively believing that you can only invade foreign countries if they actually have weapons of mass destruction, wants to hand the Rabbit's Foot to Middle Eastern terrorists so the US will invade the Middle East, which would probably kill more people than the bioweapon. He engages in an elaborate deception by pretending to work for the IMF while in reality working with Davian. He is the IMF operations manager and has the power to authorize missions, making him a leader. Both villains get a score of 6, which is consequently also the score this film gets. Mission Impossible 3 beats the other two films in terms of both quantity and quality of secrets. At the start of the film, Ethan hasn't revealed to Julia that he works as a spy, and instead masquerades as an employee of the somewhat less prestigious Department of Transportation. When he gets a phone call asking him to go on a mission while he's at a party, he dumps all the ice and pretends that they've run out to give him an excuse to leave the house and receive a secret message. He ultimately accepts the mission and tells Julia he's going to a conference as a cover for him going to the mission. Lindsay sends Ethan a secret message she doesn't tell the IMF about. Ethan keeps information about Davian being at the Vatican secret from the IMF and authorizes the mission to capture Davian in secret. Ethan then lies about going on a business trip to his wife as a cover for his trip to the Vatican. During that mission, Ethan and Declan disguise themselves as delivery drivers. Ethan sneaks into the Vatican and pretends to be a priest. Declan pretends to be a tourist. Declan pretends to be a security guard. Jen pretends to be a party guest. Jen pretends to not know English. Ethan pretends to be Davian. Ethan disguised as Davian pretends to have a cough. The team fakes a car bombing. Ethan imitates his boss, Theodore Brassels, while speaking on the radio. Ethan pretends to be a tourist who doesn't know English. Ethan sneaks into a skyscraper to steal the rabbit's foot. Ethan tricks Musgrave into calling Julia as a ploy to incapacitate him and find out where Julia is. Ethan sneaks into the medicine store where Julia is kept. Finally, Brassel says he'll keep the information about what the rabbit's foot is a secret from Ethan unless he stays with the IMF. That's a total of 24 instances of secrecy. 22 of them are relatively small scale. The first large-scale secret, lying to your wife about your entire past until you're married to each other, she's been kidnapped by terrorists, and she's had to kill 3 people, one of whom is you, and then bring you back from the dead, is a pretty big one. The second large-scale secret is Ethan authorizing an entire secret mission, which, considering its absurd complexity, is a pretty big secret. The film has the most secrets, and the biggest secrets yet, earning this film an 8. Just like in Mission Impossible 2, Ethan is the perfect picture of loyalty. He is unflinchingly loyal to Julia and is willing to do pretty much anything to save her. He is also very loyal to his country. Even after the IMF tase him, tie him down, and wheel him off to jail, he still fights on their side and rejoins. Ethan's team members are also very loyal to him, helping him carry out all of his insane plans and risking their lives simply because they care about him. Julia is similarly loyal to Ethan, killing 2 people to protect him. Conversely, the villains are a disloyal bunch. Musgrave is a traitor to the IMF who gets one of its agents killed and tries to frame Brassels for his misdeeds, while Davian is an American who's selling weapons to America's enemies. Once again, we have a story of absolute loyalty on the heroic side and absolute disloyalty on the villain side, earning it a perfect 10. The presence of revenge in Mission Impossible 3 is a mixed bag. The Berlin mission isn't motivated by revenge because Cruise hasn't lost anyone at this point, and there is no one to avenge. The second mission is, in my opinion, entirely driven by revenge. My reasoning for this one is very long and requires great speculation, so I'm just gonna put a bunch of text up, and you can read it if you feel like it. With the mission in Shanghai, Ethan's sole motivation is saving Julia, so there's no revenge motivation. Ethan is motivated by revenge for part of the film, but isn't motivated by it for the rest of it, earning this film a 4. The budget of the IMF has definitely gone up since the last film. Our heroes use a ton of pretty expensive looking gear and travel to and from 3 different locations. In addition, Brassels gives a very expensive apology gift to Ethan. A lot of government property also gets destroyed. During the Berlin mission, the team blows up one of their own vans while they're getting away. During the Rome mission, they blow up, and I quote, a really nice car that belongs to the government. A drone attack destroys 2 government cars and damages a bridge, and 1 government car gets damaged during a chase in Shanghai. Our heroes also destroy a lot of stuff. They blow up a whole building in Berlin and cause a helicopter crash that damages a wind turbine. They then break down a wall underneath the Vatican. Ethan shoots down the drone that was attacking the bridge. There is a substantial amount of destruction after this point, but again, he's on vacation, so it doesn't count. The levels of government expenditure and property destruction dwarf that of Mission Impossible 2, earning this film a 2. Adding up all the scores, we have the final score for Mission Impossible 3 of 46. To fully explain Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol's stance on psychiatry, I finally have to explain what auditing is. Scientologists believe that all mental health problems are caused by traumatic memories known as engrams. To get rid of these engrams, a person undergoes auditing, a process by which an auditor asks them questions to guide them to traumatic memories. The process of recounting these memories is supposed to get rid of the engram and fix the issue. In a break from the rest of the franchise, the person with the mental issues in Ghost Protocol isn't Ethan Hunt, but instead his teammate William Brandt. Brandt is an IMF agent who was on a security team meant to protect Ethan and Julia. When Julia was supposedly killed, he felt extreme guilt about this and quit working as an agent. After Ethan's team experiences a setback, another team member, Agent Carter, asks Brandt a question that causes him to divulge his sad backstory. This structure of someone asking questions that prompt someone else to recount a traumatic memory is strikingly similar to auditing. However, there's an issue. After this session, Brandt clearly hasn't gotten over his guilt, as seen by how he refuses to rejoin the IMF at the end when Ethan offers him a mission. This is a violation of the auditor's code, which states that auditors aren't allowed to end a session until they get a floating needle. a sign that the engram has been fully processed. Carter breaks other auditing rules, such as not auditing someone while they're physically tired and not being angry at the person being audited. However, she's still abiding by the majority of auditing rules, so for this reasonably accurate, albeit brief depiction of auditing, this film gets an 8. Ethan only displays a single superpower in this film: car immunity. Throughout the film, Ethan is horribly abused by the cars. He blew up too many of them in Mission Impossible 2, and now they're out for revenge. He slams into the roof of a van, gets trapped in an underwater car, gets hit by a car, and at the climax of the film, drives a car off a tower to get down the tower. It's miraculous that he doesn't flat out die in any of these car-related crises, but on top of that, he never even gets knocked unconscious. This points to Ethan having some sort of power that protects him from cars. There honestly aren't any other moments of superhuman ability. He climbs, runs, and fights very impressively, but none of it rises to the point of superhuman. Consequently, this film gets a 3. In terms of truly impossible tech in Ghost Protocol, there's our returning champs, the perfect masks, and the machine that makes perfect masks, as well as a new sinkhole generating machine. The plausible but pretty advanced technology includes scanning contact lenses, a remote-controlled balloon, a keycard cheat device, a device that can do ventriloquism, the ghost projector, a futuristic-looking train car, a laser cutter, sticky gecko gloves, a machine that remodels metal, a printer briefcase, a radioactive isotope-based tracker, a magnetic rover, and a sick-looking car that detects people for you and lets you do cool spy planning on the windshield. Overall, the level of technology has risen quite a bit from Mission Impossible 3, becoming a lot more advanced and earning this film a 7. The villain of Ghost Protocol, Kurt Hendricks, heralds the transition of Mission Impossible villains from profiteers to true believers. Where all but one villain before were motivated by profit, he's motivated by a desire to cause a nuclear war that he believes will make humanity stronger, which is in the same I need to kill a bunch of people for the greater good ballpark as population control. More importantly, his plan would kill a bunch of people and use nuclear weapons, just like Lord Xenu's. He also does a lot of deceiving, disguising himself as his own henchman in Dubai and pretending to be the Russian government to get the submarine to launch a nuke. 7 points. There's a ton of secrets in Ghost Protocol. Ethan pretends to be Russian while he's in prison. IMF agent Hanaway covertly steals a package in a flashback. Ethan gets a secret message from a phone booth. Ethan and Benji impersonate Russian generals. Carter disguises herself as a tourist. Ethan sneaks into the Russian archive room. Ethan changes disguises from a general to a tourist. The IMF secretary plans to allow Ethan to escape when they're in a car together that's going to take Ethan to jail. This doesn't go well. Ethan uses the secretary's dead body and a flare to throw Russian security forces off his scent. Ethan's team changes room numbers and manipulates elevators to trick the villains into thinking they're in one room when they're actually in another. All 4 members of the team pretend to be people they're not in this scheme. Ethan lies about having a ton of backup during the meeting. Grant decides to not tell Ethan about his supposed responsibility for Julia's death. Ethan doesn't tell his teammates where he's going when he goes to meet a Russian arms dealer. Ethan and Carter pretend to be party guests. Brant and Benji sneak into the maintenance area. Carter pretends to be in love with an Indian billionaire. Both Ethan and Carter pretend to be in love with each other to make the Indian billionaire jealous. Last but not least, Ethan keeps his secrets that his wife didn't actually die and that he went to prison as part of an IMF operation a secret from his teammates until the very end. This adds up to 26 cases of secrecy, a bit more than Mission Impossible 3. However, Ghost Protocol doesn't have secrets that are quite as large as Mission Impossible 3's. Consequently, this film also earns a score of 8. Loyalty isn't emphasized as much in Ghost Protocol compared to the other films of this franchise. Technically speaking, Ethan, Benji, and Carter have all been disavowed by the US and are hunted as rogue agents. However, the US never sends any agents after them, so their loyalty is never tested. The only real glimmer of loyalty in this film is the glorious friendship between Ethan and Bogdan, a random Russian who Ethan befriends in prison. Ethan risks life and limb, fighting through a sea of buff Russian guys to save Bogdan. On the flip side, even after realizing that Ethan isn't Russian and getting tranquilized by him, Bogdan still declares Ethan his friend and helps him get in touch with his cousin, the arms dealer. While I would love to give Ghost Protocol a perfect 10 for its inclusion of this beautiful friendship that brought a tear to my eye, Bogdan isn't actually that important of a character. So even after accounting for him, the loyalty of this team isn't actually that big of a deal in this film. The villain is, as usual, very treacherous. Hendricks is a nuclear strategist who worked for Russia right up to the point at which he committed terrorist attacks against them, stole its nuclear technology, and tried to destroy the world, which, last time I checked, Russia is a part of. Furthermore, Hendricks is Swedish, and barring the existence of some sort of super advanced Blahaj-based nuclear defense system, Sweden would also get wiped out in a nuclear war. Even so, this film never makes a big deal out of the fact that he's a traitor. Overall, the heroes are loyal and the villains are disloyal as usual, but Ghost Protocol just doesn't emphasize loyalty as much, earning this film 6 points. There's only one case of straight-up revenge in Ghost Protocol, and that's when Agent Carter kicks the assassin Moreau out of a window as revenge for Moreau killing her lover, Agent Hanaway. Moreau wasn't the main villain, she was just someone who Hendricks hired. There's also a lot of extenuating circumstances. The minuscule amount that revenge factors into this film gets it a 4. The tax evasion section for Ghost Protocol is actually incredibly easy to calculate, because every single case of expenditure and property destruction is outweighed by a single big-ticket item, the Kremlin. After Ethan and his team break into the Kremlin, it blows up. They don't do it themselves, but Russian taxpayers are still going to have to foot the bill. 1 point. Adding up all the scores, we have the final score for Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol of 44. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is the first film of the series to not feature any kind of mental health issues. However, there is a small intersection with Scientology. Benji gets tested by a polygraph machine, a machine that's very similar to an e-meter, a device that's used during auditing to locate engrams. The polygraph machine is fooled by Benji, and it's also used by the CIA, who are actively trying to hunt down Ethan at the time. For portraying a machine similar to the e-meter as ineffective and used by evil people, this film gets 3 points. Ethan's superpowers, which have been waning a bit throughout this franchise, have ratcheted back up to full strength. The return of Ethan Hunt the Uber Theta is heralded by the opening scene of the film, in which he uses super grip to hold onto the edge of a plane. Later on, Ethan runs down a narrow passageway while getting shot at from a pretty short range by highly trained spies. His back is fully exposed and there is literally nowhere else to shoot, and yet he doesn't end up totally riddled with bullets and is somehow able to escape with only 1 wound. There is no explanation other than Ethan being bulletproof. Ethan later drowns and has to be revived with a defibrillator. He's briefly incapacitated, but is very quickly up and running, doing crazy driving stunts and zooming around on a motorcycle. No one other than a superhuman with some kind of healing factor would be able to do all this. Finally, just like in Ghost Protocol, we see the return of car immunity. Ethan manages to endure a quite frankly insane car crash without getting knocked out. That's a total of 4 powers, a glorious return to the heights of the original Mission Impossible that earns this film 10 points. Rogue Nation has a ton of sci-fi level technology. There's the traditional masks, voice changers, and mask machines. On top of that, there's a weird computer Benji uses with paper-thin screens, a giant underwater computer facility, and a powerful hypnosis serum that can rapidly rewrite memories. For a plausible but very advanced technology, there's a hacking tablet, holograms, a sniper rifle flute, perfect lockpicks, powerful scanners, a car that can remotely hack and jam things, a glass-breaking machine, a suit that detects oxygen levels, a ring that tests all combinations, fingerprint detecting glass, a device that can remotely wipe files, and the return of the scanning contact lenses. The overall technological level is roughly on par with that of Ghost Protocol, but with more really out there technology, Rogue Nation edges it out and gets 8 points. The villain of Rogue Nation, Solomon Lane, is a leader, more specifically the leader of the Syndicate, a secret society that seeks to overthrow the existing world order. Lane engages in a ton of deception, as his entire organization is highly secretive and made up of spies who are presumed dead but are actually alive. Lastly, he kills a lot of people in terrorist attacks. 6 points. It would be more appropriate to call Rogue Nation a teeming mass of secrets in a trench coat pretending to be a film than to call it a film, because the sheer number of secrets that its characters keep is uncountably high. Ethan receives a secret message from a vinyl record. Brant refuses to tell Congress about IMF missions. Brant lies to CIA Director Hunley and tells him he doesn't know where Ethan is. Ilsa Faust, Ethan's new ally turned enemy turned ally turned enemy turned ally, lies to the Syndicate after she helps Ethan escape them. Ethan goes on the run for the CIA. Ethan tricks the CIA into thinking he's in Havana when he's actually in Paris. Benji secretly plays Halo at work. Benji lies on a polygraph the CIA gives him every week. Ethan tricks Benji into thinking he won opera tickets. Ethan, Benji, and Ilsa all pretend to be party guests to enter the opera. Ilsa sneaks on stage to assassinate the Austrian Chancellor. Ethan, Ilsa, and Benji all sneak out of the opera. Ilsa pretends to the Syndicate that she was captured by Ethan. Ilsa lies to Lane about what information Ethan knows. Ethan and Ilsa sneak into a power plant that holds a very important file. Benji pretends to be the owner of the file thereafter. Benji tricks a security guard into thinking his keycard worked. Ilsa secretly meets with Chief Atlee, the head of MI6. This meeting also reveals that Ilsa had only been pretending to work for the Syndicate and actually works for MI6. Ilsa disappears when Luther pursues her. Brant pretends to betray Ethan to Hunley. Ethan pretends to be Atlee. Ethan and Brant drip feed the Prime Minister information under false pretenses to get information about the Syndicate's origins. Ethan and Brant frame Atlee for tranquilizing the Prime Minister. Ethan lures Lane into a trap. Hunley lies to Congress to get the IMF reinstated. And, in the funniest scene of the whole franchise, Brant again refuses to tell Congress about IMF missions. This is a whopping 32 instances of secrecy. 3 of these are really big. Ilsa pretends to be a loyal Syndicate agent for 2 whole years. Ethan's on the run from the CIA for 6 months. And Benji's been doing polygraphs ever since then, so he's also been lying to the CIA for 6 months. In addition, one of the questions on that polygraph test is whether or not Benji's been leaking information to Ethan, which heavily implies that he has indeed been secretly leaking information to Ethan. With both an incredible breadth and depth of secrets, Rogue Nation earns a perfect 10. Ethan is as loyal as ever in Rogue Nation. Even after months of being on the run from the CIA, he still acts to help the US and destroy the Syndicate. He also acts very loyally towards both Benji and Ilsa, putting his life on the line to protect them. Benji, as previously established, probably leaks information to Ethan. He also refuses Ethan's demand that he go back to the CIA to save himself and instead joins Ethan on a risky adventure. Similarly, Brant and Luther willfully become fugitives to help Ethan the second they learn that the CIA is planning on just killing him on sight. On the villain's side, the Syndicate is literally made up of a bunch of disillusioned spies who are actively trying to destroy the status quo they used to preserve. And Lane, who is British, is actively plotting to steal billions of pounds from his country. So we have a return to form. The good old days of absolutely loyal heroes and absolutely disloyal villains earns this film its 3rd perfect 10. Is what I would say, if not for one Ilsa Faust, the most disloyal person ever. Ilsa Faust works for MI6. However, she has since betrayed MI6 to join the Syndicate. Except not really, because she's actually a deep cover agent sent by MI6 to learn more about the Syndicate. She pretty much does whatever the Syndicate wants until Ethan gets captured by them, at which point she betrays the Syndicate and helps Ethan escape. Later on, after Ethan shoots the Austrian Chancellor before she can, she tries to kill him. She then accepts his aid in escaping the building and betrays the Syndicate by giving him a USB that leads to intel that could destroy the Syndicate. Well, she thinks there's intel that could destroy the Syndicate, but it's actually information on the location of a bunch of money that would be helpful to the Syndicate that she's been deceived by Lane about. But in her head, it's a betrayal. She then further betrays Lane, she thinks, by breaking into the power plant to get the intel. She then betrays Ethan by electrocuting Benji, stealing the intel and running off on a motorcycle. She again betrays the Syndicate, she thinks, by delivering the intel to MI6. After an entire film of flipping back and forth, she betrays the Syndicate for the last time, aiding Ethan in its destruction and killing many of its members. 7 points. Throughout Rogue Nation, Ethan is motivated by one thing and one thing only: box trauma. At the beginning of the film, Lane traps him in a sealed glass container, fills it with sleeping gas, and executes an IMF agent while Ethan can only watch helplessly. In spite of the huge potential negative effects of the Syndicate, a massive terrorist organization getting a big pile of money, Ethan legitimately seems to be solely motivated by a desire to avenge himself and the IMF agent whose name he didn't even know. At the very end of the film, when Lane thinks that Ethan is going to hand him the location of the big pile of money, he gloats that from the moment he killed that IMF agent, he knew Ethan would end up here. This suggests that Ethan is heavily motivated by a desire to avenge that agent. But of course, we can't just go off of what Lane has to say, he's the villain. If we analyze what Ethan has to say, we can safely conclude that he is motivated by the box. Ethan repeatedly references the glass box that Lane put him in when they're talking, saying that he's going to put Lane in a box. Then at the very end, the way that he takes out Lane is in fact by trapping him in a box and gassing him. This isn't like a thing that just happens. None of the previous villain deaths were some sort of ironic reflection of how they had wronged Ethan. No, Ethan deliberately went out of his way to catch Lane in the exact way that Lane caught him, which suggests that he took getting trapped in that box really personally and just wants to do it to Lane as retribution. Whether we're looking at this from the hero's perspective or the villain's perspective, the question of what motivates Ethan Hunt has one singular answer: revenge. 10 points. We now arrive at a very unorthodox tax evasion scoring. I could tell you all about the flagpole that Ethan destroys and this motorcycle he blows up, but it's all irrelevant, because Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is the first film in which the government actually has a surplus. For starters, the film opens with the IMF getting dissolved. While parts of the IMF get subsumed by the CIA, Hunley's wording heavily implies that most of the IMF is just ejected, which means a lot of government savings on IMF operations. Now, the IMF does get reinstated at the end of the film, but 6 months of savings are still likely millions of dollars. But if that's not good enough for you, there's a second source of government surplus, this time for the British government. The giant pile of money Lane's after is a pile of £2.4 billion that's spread across a bunch of bank accounts. Ethan memorizes all of them and presumably tells them to the British. It is, after all, the British government's money, and the British government knows that Ethan had the disc with the location of all the money, so they'd probably be pushing pretty hard for the Americans to tell them where the money is. So, the US saves millions of dollars, and the UK gets billions of pounds. This increase in government funding could finance huge tax breaks, which would surely make the immortal, all-powerful Thetan of L. Ron Hubbard, hallowed is his name, who sadly abandoned his earthly body before he could see the Church of Scientology regain tax-exempt status, shed a single tear as he soars through the cosmos. 10 points. Adding up all the scores, we have our final score for Mission Impossible Rogue Nation of 64. Mission Impossible Fallout sees the return of Ethan Hunt having bad mental health. This time, Ethan has a nightmare caused by his guilt surrounding how Julia had to throw away her old life after he faked her death. The nightmare causes him great paranoia, as seen by how he grabs his gun when he wakes up. This issue is ultimately resolved when Julia tells him that she actually likes her new life. Instead of leading Ethan towards a traumatic past memory, Julia is instead trying to point out and eliminate a negative thought pattern. This is cognitive therapy, which is psychiatry, which is the work of Xenu-loving worm people. Of course, Julia isn't actually a psychiatrist, and she isn't using the methods that Scientologists most firmly oppose, such as psychoactive drugs and electroconvulsive therapy. However, a psychiatric technique is still being portrayed in a positive light, earning this film a 3. Ethan displays 2 superpowers in Fallout. However, unlike the 2 other films where he's displayed 2 powers, I'm still giving this film a 10. Why? Because one of these powers is simply undeniable. Everything up to this point could hypothetically be chalked up to an extraordinary level of luck and or skill. I have subjectively decided that such a level of luck or skill is too much for me to believe, but a different observer could with good reason feel differently. However, the Ethan of this film has a power that simply can't be hand-waved away by even the most accommodating of interpretations: clairvoyance. In the aforementioned dream, Ethan and Julia are by snow-capped mountains and a lake. He then sees Solomon Lane, who tells Ethan he should have killed him, and then a nuke goes off. It's later revealed that the villain's plan is is to set off a nuclear bomb in the exact location that Ethan's dreaming about, a location that both Julia and Lane end up at by the end of the movie. In addition, Lane tells Ethan that he should have killed him when Ethan's interrogating him later on. At this point, Lane's in jail and hasn't broken out for 2 whole years, Ethan has no idea where Julia is, and Ethan doesn't even know anyone who has any plan involving a nuke. There is no explanation outside of him getting visions of the future. For the first time, a film provides indisputable proof of Ethan's powers, earning it a 10. The other superpower is super grip, by the way. Again, every film up to this point has followed a trend of technology advancing with each entry. Fallout bucks this trend by being remarkably low tech. For impossible tech, we have our classic mask, voice changer, and mask printer. For advanced tech, we have a remote controlled car, some sort of tracking device, truth serum, mask scanner, a drone, tranquilizer guns, a tablet, a room made of panels, a really complicated nuclear bomb, skydiving suits, and the film's signature technology, microwave tracking chips. This honestly isn't that much. Most of this stuff is commercially available, and some of these are even downgrades of technology used in previous Mission Impossible films. I mean, would you prefer this dinky remote controlled car, or the car from Ghost Particle that you can probably play Angry Birds on? The technology is roughly on par with that found in Mission Impossible 2, earning this film a 5. The main villain of Fallout is August Walker. His plan would kill billions and use nuclear weapons. He also engages in a lot of deception by pretending to be a regular CIA agent and trying to frame Ethan for all of his crimes. He hopes that this plan will bring world peace, which is a bit like Xenu trying to fix overpopulation. With his reasonable similarity to Xenu, Walker earns this film a 7. Just like with the level of technology, the level of secrecy sees a big dip between Rogue Nation and Fallout. Of course, there's still a lot of secrets. Ethan gets a secret message from a book. Ethan's team tricks one of Walker's accomplices into unlocking a phone using a fake newscast. Benji pretends to be Wolf Blitzer. Ethan covertly skydives onto a building. Ethan hides in a bathroom stall. Ilsa refuses to tell Ethan who she's working for. Ethan pretends to be John Lark. Ethan, Ilsa, and Walker pretend that they had a fist fight to scare off some people. Ethan tricks White Widow into thinking that the assassins who are after him are after her. After being confronted with a plan to free Solomon Lane that would kill a ton of people, Ethan secretly formulates a plan that would kill no one. Benji and Luther secretly free and transport Lane. Ethan flees to and hides in the sewers. Ethan's team pulls a tracking device out of Lane and flies it away on a drone to mislead the French police. Ethan tells White Widow he did his secret plan because the original plan was bad, instead of saying he wanted to save lives. Ethan lies to White Widow and tells her he'll capture Ilsa Faust. Ethan refuses to tell Ilsa where Lane is. Ethan, Benji, Luther, and Hunley trick Walker into revealing that he's evil. Benji pretends to be Lane as part of their ruse. Ethan and Julia make up a story about who Ethan is when talking with Julia's new husband. Ethan sneaks aboard a helicopter to hijack it. Ethan covertly flies away above Walker to drop a rock on him. That's a total of 22 instances of secrecy. Only one of these deceptions, Ethan pretending to be John Lark, lasts for any time at all. Overall, there's less secrecy than in the previous few films. As a result, this film gets a 7. With a consistency that honestly makes me question why I added this category, Fallout is once again a story that heavily emphasizes loyalty. Ethan is fiercely loyal to his friends. When forced to choose between running away with the plutonium and saving his friend Luther, he chooses to save Luther. Ethan's friends, including Ilsa, are all loyal to him. Even though they don't know how to defuse the bombs, they still decide to go on what is effectively a suicide mission so they can help Ethan. On the opposite side, Walker is of course a traitor who gets a bunch of CIA agents killed, kills Hunley, and tries to frame Ethan. The organization he's working with, the Apostles, are the remnants of the Syndicate, meaning that everyone Ethan's fighting is very treacherous. There is one scene that holds this film back from a perfect 10. Ethan, perhaps due to pent-up rage about all the times he got betrayed by Ilsa, betrays Ilsa for a change and rams her with his car. Granted, the film would have been very boring if they had both refused to hurt each other and stood there until Ethan got a call telling him the nukes had gone off, but nonetheless, the film gets a 9. Ethan isn't really driven by revenge in Fallout. Much like in Mission Impossible 2, there is a hypothetical threat of revenge, but it's never really emphasized. As mentioned before, Walker kills Hunley, who Ethan now likes even though Hunley did order the CIA to shoot him on sight. In another parallel to Mission Impossible 2, Ethan prioritizes getting the detonator that will allow him to stop the bombs over killing Walker, indicating that revenge isn't really on his mind. This film gets a 2. The budget windfall of Rogue Nation sadly hasn't been replicated in Fallout. The IMF team employs an elaborate fake film set, moderately expensive equipment, and flies all around the world, which adds up to a bit less than the cost of Mission Impossible 3's operations. The government property that gets destroyed includes his computer and a car that gets a bit beat up. Ethan's feud with the cars continues into this film as he damages a ton of vehicles. He crashes 2 cars as part of the plan to trick Walker's accomplice. He and Walker totally annihilate this bathroom in a fight. Ethan rams an armored car into the river. Ethan rams through a garage door. 2 cars get damaged by his truck. A bunch of cars crash because of Ethan. The truck Ethan's driving and the alleyway he's driving through get damaged. 2 police cars crash chasing Ethan. Ethan's motorcycle crashes, damaging both the motorcycle and a car. Ethan runs over a bunch of motorcycles. Ethan inflicts emotional damage on all of these people by interrupting their funeral. Ethan breaks a window. Benji breaks some locks. Ethan drops a bunch of rocks, which cost like $50 or something. Ethan crashes 2 helicopters. A small house is trashed in a fight. Ultimately, the levels of property damage are relatively low for a Mission Impossible movie. With the exception of the helicopters, all the vehicles are only badly damaged instead of completely blowing up, meaning they can hypothetically be salvaged. With regards to property damage, no expensive labs or huge compounds get blown up in Fallout. Instead, there's only a window, a bathroom, and a pretty terrible looking house. The damage is of course still extensive, and helicopters certainly aren't cheap, but in the kingdom of the fiscally irresponsible, the moderately fiscally irresponsible are king. 6 points. Adding up all the scores, we arrive at our final score for Mission Impossible Fallout of 49. Our next section will discuss Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is still in theaters. I would like to give an additional spoiler warning at this point. If you haven't watched the film, skip to this timestamp to avoid spoilers. Furthermore, I only saw the film once, so there may be some things I missed here and there. Dead Reckoning 1 sees Ethan encounter a demon from his past, the robot apocalypse messiah Gabriel. The clash between the two resurfaces a past memory of Ethan's in which Gabriel killed someone close to him. Ethan doesn't deal with this trauma at all. 5 points. Ethan has two powers in Dead Reckoning 1. The first is pocket teleportation. Ethan does a lot of pickpocketing in this film, the apotheosis of which is him somehow being able to swipe a very important key out of Gabriel's pockets while he's fighting him on a moving train and trying not to get stabbed. This strikes me as impossible, leaving only a supernatural explanation. The second power is our old favorite Super Grip, which Ethan uses to hold on to not just a moving train, but also various handholds when that train abruptly stops moving and starts dangling off a cliff. 5 points. Dead Reckoning 1, as usual, features quite a few advanced toys, such as ARG glasses and Spy Uber, but the real star of the show is the Entity, a super advanced sentient AI. It's hard to say whether such a thing is 3 minutes away, 1 year away, 5 years away, 20 years away, 100 years away, or flat out impossible. However, I have it on good authority that no such thing exists, so for now, 10 points. Dead Reckoning 1 is our second double feature in the villains department. Its two villains are Gabriel and the Entity. Gabriel wants to kill literally everyone because he's a sadist, engages in deception by lying to Grace about how Ethan treats those close to him, and caused Ethan mental problems by killing Marie. The Entity wants to kill everyone, probably for self-preservation purposes, and engages in a ludicrously high number of deceptions. Gabriel gets 6 points and the Entity gets 4, earning this film 5 points. Dead Reckoning 1 has 27 cases of secrecy. Ethan receives a secret message telling him about his mission. Ethan hides behind a sand dune to evade bounty hunters. Ethan sends a secret message to Ilsa using a mirror. Ilsa fakes her death as a ruse to attack Ethan because she thinks Ethan is a bounty hunter. Ethan fakes Ilsa's death again to throw off the intelligence agencies. Ethan sneaks into a top-secret intelligence briefing disguised as Kittredge's secretary. Ethan disguises himself as Kittredge to escape the meeting. Ethan's team hacks into the US government's facial recognition system to make two different people appear as if they are Ethan. Benji sneaks into the baggage area of the airport. Grace picks a courier's pocket. Ethan picks Grace's pocket. Grace picks Ethan's pocket twice. Luther neglects to tell Ethan about the supposed nuke in the baggage area. Grace plants the key on a passenger. Ethan pretends to be Grace's lawyer. Grace pretends that Ethan groped her. Ilsa neglects to tell Ethan about how she found out about the key. Grace hides the key during a meeting with the White Widow. Ethan covertly tells Ilsa to run. Luther tells Ethan he needs to hide away in a secure location so he can make a program that can destroy the Entity. Grace pretends to be White Widow. Benji neglects to tell Ethan about how he's going to have to jump off a mountain to catch a train. Grace pickpockets Kittredge. Ethan pickpockets Gabriel. But wait, we've reached the end, and I've only brought up 26 cases of secrecy. Didn't I say 27? How silly of me. Partway through Dead Reckoning 1, Ilsa gets knifed in the heart by Gabriel and dies. Except she doesn't, because she's totally alive. I have a lot of reasons for this belief, but most of them just boil down to it would be bad writing if she actually died, which isn't a great thing to count on. So I'm just going to give what is, in my opinion, the strongest piece of evidence for her survival. Paris. Towards the end of Dead Reckoning 1, Paris gets stabbed in the heart in the exact same way that Ilsa does by Gabriel. Now, it would be pretty reasonable to assume that she just dies right then and there, but she survives for quite a while, saves Ethan, tells him some important intel, and then seemingly dies, only for it to be revealed that she still has a pulse, suggesting that she may well survive into Dead Reckoning 2. Why would something so similar to Ilsa's death happen and then get faked out if not to indicate that Ilsa's death is also a fake out? But if that's not enough, I will prove that Ilsa is alive by drawing parallels to another story with a character very much connected to Ilsa Faust. Goethe's Faust. Ilsa Faust shares a name with Faust, a scholar from the play Faust who makes a deal with the demon Mephistopheles. The deal ultimately results in Faust's death. Taking Ilsa as a proxy for Faust, Gabriel, who kills her, is a proxy for Mephistopheles. If we were to end here with Faust, we would be forced to conclude that Ilsa is in fact dead. However, the plot of Faust doesn't actually seem that similar to the plot of Dead Reckoning 1. There is, however, a story that connects to Faust and has a very similar plot to Dead Reckoning 1, the plot of Sonic 06. The central villain of Sonic 06 is Mephiles, a character whose name is very similar to Mephistopheles, making him Sonic 06's proxy for Gabriel, and Sonic, who he kills toward the end of the game, a proxy for Ilsa. Gabriel wants to aid the Entity. Mephiles wants to revive Solaris, the all-powerful god of Soliana. Gabriel desires the two halves of a key that can be used to access the Entity's source code. One of these is in the hands of Ethan. Mephiles wants to fuse the two halves of Solaris, himself and Iblis. Iblis is sealed away in the Princess Elise, who is from now on going to act as a proxy for Ethan. Gabriel claims that if either Ilsa or Grace dies, then Ethan will act in such a way that the key ends up in his hands. So he kills Ilsa, resulting in him getting his hands on the key. 80. Mephiles kills Sonic, resulting in Elise crying and releasing Iblis. The point is, Sonic 06 and Dead Reckoning 1 basically have the same story. And guess what happens right after Sonic gets killed by Mephiles? The gang uses the Chaos Emeralds and the power of love to bring him back to life. So, Ilsa's not dead. Also, she's going to go Super Saiyan, so look forward to that. Ilsa Faust faked her own death, deceiving not just the whole world, but also the audience. The grandest, most all-consuming, most resplendent secret yet. 10 points. 8 if she's dead, but she's definitely alive, so 10 points. When one door closes, another opens. And when one character dies, and when I say die, I of course mean elaborately faking her death, another character enters. Dead Reckoning 1 sees the entrance of Grace, a character who acts very much like how Ilsa acted in Rogue Nation. Grace is the first character in the franchise who truly comprehends how insane the plot of these movies are, which drives her to very understandably throw Ethan under the bus quite a few times. She pickpockets Ethan and runs off with the key at the airport. She pretends he groped her to get away from him in Italy. She handcuffs him to a car to get away from him. She runs away after Ethan gets bogged down fighting some goons that she was fighting. Finally, she gets to the brink of betraying him and making a deal to hand over the key to Kittredge before she has a change of heart and sides with Ethan. Of course, you know how the rest goes. Ethan is very loyal to his friends, refusing to even consider letting them die for the greater good, and risking everything to protect Grace. Ethan's friends are loyal to him, joining his mission even though it makes them international fugitives. Gabriel is disloyal to humanity, which he wants to kill. The entity is disloyal to its users on the submarine, who it kills. Just like in Rogue Nation, all the heroes are loyal, except for one, and all the villains are disloyal. 7 points. For the early parts of the film, Ethan isn't motivated by revenge. Instead, he just wants to save Ilsa and destroy the entity. This gets turned on its head once Gabriel shows up and definitely kills Ilsa, at which point revenge becomes his driving motivation. The central nature of revenge in his mind can be seen in the final battle. Ethan is told over and over by Luther that he can't kill Gabriel, or they won't be able to locate the entity and it will win. Despite these stakes, Ethan almost kills him anyway, only being prevented from stabbing him to death by the timely intervention of California Governor Gavin Newsom. While revenge doesn't factor into Ethan's motivations until relatively late in the film, his desire for revenge is so intense that he's willing to end the world to get it. In the spirit of quality over quantity, I'm giving Dead Reckoning 1 a 10. Dead Reckoning 1 is a film of many seconds. It is the second film to feature Eugene Kittredge, it is the second film to feature Ethan allying with the skilled thief, and it is the second film in which Russian taxpayers get colossally, massively, royally screwed over. In the very opening of the film, a super advanced Russian submarine, the Sevastopol, gets sunk due to the machinations of the entity. Now, the most recent model of Russian submarine, the Yasin M, costs about $1.6 billion per unit. This means that if the Sevastopol costs anywhere in that ballpark, we're already looking at an astronomically high tax bill. But that's not all. As a consequence of the entity trying to break into the intelligence agencies, every intelligence agency on Earth rapidly works to convert to analog technologies that the entity can't break into. This would also be very expensive. So, 1 point. Adding up all the scores, we get a final score for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 of 53. And we're done. We have a Scientology alignment score, trademark pending, for every film in the series. And we can finally answer the question that started this whole adventure. How closely do the Mission Impossible films adhere to the principles of Scientology? Not that much. Bye.